In the heart of Italy, on the banks of the Tiber River, there was once a small village of shepherds and farmers. It was not grand, it was not powerful, it was just a settlement of people trying to survive. But these people had something special. They had determination, discipline, and a belief that they were destined for greatness. The village grew into a city, the city grew into a republic, and the republic grew into an empire. The Romans were not the strongest or the richest, but they were the most organized. They built roads that connected the known world. They built aqueducts that brought water to their cities. They built an army that was the most disciplined in history. The Roman army was the backbone of the empire. Every soldier was trained to fight, to march, and to obey. They carried heavy packs, built camps every night, and fought in formation. They were not just soldiers, they were engineers, builders, and farmers. They built roads, bridges, and walls wherever they went. The Romans believed in law and order. They created a legal system that protected citizens and punished criminals. They believed that everyone was equal under the law, at least in theory. In practice, the rich had more power, but the idea of justice was deeply rooted in Roman culture. The Romans also believed in the power of ideas. They adopted the Greek gods, but they gave them new names. They adopted Greek philosophy, but they gave it a Roman twist. They adopted Greek art, but they made it more realistic. The Romans were not inventors, they were improvers. They took what others had created and made it better. A Roman society was divided into classes. At the top were the patricians, the wealthy nobles who owned land and held political power. Below them were the plebeians, the common people who worked as farmers, merchants, and soldiers. At the bottom were the slaves, people who had been captured in war or born into servitude. The Romans were also deeply religious. They believed in many gods, each with a specific role. Jupiter was the king of the gods. Mars was the god of war. Venus was the goddess of love. The Romans believed that their success was a gift from the gods, and they performed rituals and sacrifices to keep the gods happy. The Romans also loved entertainment. They built massive amphitheaters where they watched gladiators fight to the death. They built racetracks where they watched chariots race. They built public baths where they could relax and socialize. The Romans believed in the power of leisure. They worked hard, but they also played hard. The Roman family was the center of life. The father was the head of the household. He had absolute power over his children and slaves. The mother was responsible for raising the children and managing the household. The Romans believed in discipline, loyalty, and respect for authority. Roman women had more freedom than women in many other ancient cultures. They could own property, run businesses, and attend public events. However, they could not vote or hold political office. The Romans believed in the importance of family, but they also believed in the importance of individual achievement. The Roman Empire reached its peak in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. It stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. It encompassed over 60 million people, 1/5 of the world's population. The Romans controlled the Mediterranean Sea, which they called Mare Nostrum, our sea. The Romans built cities that were marvels of engineering. They built colosseums, temples, and basilicas. They built aqueducts, sewers, and public baths. They built roads that were so well constructed that some are still in use today. The Romans believed in the power of architecture. They built to last, and they did. The Romans also had a vast network of trade. They imported grain from Egypt, silk from China, and spices from India. They exported wine, olive oil, and pottery. The Roman economy was based on agriculture, trade, and slavery. The Romans believed in the power of commerce. They understood that wealth was the key to power. The Roman army was the greatest military force in the ancient world. They conquered Greece, Egypt, Gaul, and Britain. They built forts, walls, and roads to secure their conquests. They also built a navy to protect their trade routes. The Romans believed in the power of military might. They knew that power came from the barrel of a sword. The Roman Empire was also a place of culture and learning. The Romans wrote poetry, history, and philosophy. They built libraries and schools. They believed in the power of education. They believed that knowledge was the key to civilization. The decline of the Roman Empire began in the 3rd century AD. The empire became too large to govern effectively. The borders were too long to defend. The army was too expensive to maintain. The economy was too fragile to support. The Romans began to lose their grip on power. The emperors became corrupt and incompetent. They spent money on luxury and entertainment. They ignored the needs of the people. They failed to address the growing problems of the empire. The Romans began to lose faith in their leaders. The empire was also plagued by civil war. Generals fought each other for power. The army became divided. The provinces became restless. The Romans began to lose their sense of unity. The empire was fragmenting from within. The Romans were also facing external threats. The Germanic tribes were attacking the borders. The Persians were invading the east. The Huns were sweeping across Europe. The Romans were fighting on too many fronts and they were losing. The empire was shrinking. The economy was also collapsing. Inflation was rampant. Taxes were high. Trade was declining. The Romans were struggling to feed their people. The cities were becoming abandoned. The empire was dying. The fall of the Roman Empire was not caused by a single event. It was caused by a combination of factors. Political corruption, economic instability, military weakness, and social decay all played a role. The Romans had built a great civilization, but they had also built the seeds of its destruction. The emperors had become dictators. They ruled by fear, not by law. They ignored the will of the people. They became detached from reality. The Romans began to lose their belief in the system. The economy had become unstable. The currency had been debased. The price of goods had skyrocketed. The people were struggling to survive. The Romans had lost their economic security. The army had become ineffective. The soldiers were poorly trained and poorly equipped. The generals were corrupt and incompetent. The Romans had lost their military edge. The society had become decadent. The people had become selfish and hedonistic. They cared more about pleasure than about duty. The Romans had lost their moral compass. The empire had become too large. It was impossible to govern and protect. The Romans had become victims of their own success. They had built a great empire, but they could not maintain it. The fall of the Roman Empire is a warning for modern societies. It shows us that power is fragile. It shows us that success can lead to complacency. It shows us that even the greatest civilizations can fall. The Romans were not defeated by a single enemy. They were defeated by their own weaknesses. It teaches us that we must never take our freedoms for granted. We must protect our institutions. We must remain vigilant against corruption. We must remember that democracy is not a gift. It is a responsibility. It teaches us that we must never stop learning. The Romans stopped innovating. They stopped adapting. They stopped evolving. They became stagnant and they were left behind. It teaches us that we must never forget our values. The Romans lost their sense of duty and discipline. They became selfish and indulgent. They lost their moral compass and they lost their way. The story of Rome is a story of human ambition, achievement, and failure. It is a story that reminds us that nothing is permanent. It is a story that teaches us that we must always strive to be better. And it is a story that shows us that even in failure there is hope.